Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm Matt Connarton, and of course, to my right, appropriately enough, as always, the Honorable Gary S. Hopper.
Matt, fancy meeting you here again. It's like every week, it's like you're just there.
I know, right?
So I wonder if you're ever not there.
I don't ever actually leave the building.
So you are sometimes not here specifically.
Right. I live here, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're like a troll, like under a bridge kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you're like under the desk.
Right. I wash myself in the bathrooms right across the hall.
At least you wash yourself. I just want to thank you for that.
Well, as best I can.
Right. Yeah.
As best
There's
I can.
limitations for everything.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, somebody asked me a while back, says, don't you read all your legislative emails? And I said, no. And they said, well, you're a legislator. You have to read all your emails that anybody sends you. I said, no. So anyway, I thought I'd share with you one email I got today and give you an idea why I don't read all my emails.
Yes, yes.
Okay, this guy is calling himself Ryan O'Neill.
Yes.
But he refers to himself in the third person occasionally.
There's a lot of famous people mentioned in this email.
This email is huge. This would take, I can't read too quick because my eyes aren't very good, but it would take you half an hour anyway, or an hour to read this email.
I can probably get it all out in about 45
seconds.
seconds.
That's just a minor part of this.
Oh, this isn't even the entire email.
No, these are just sections of some of the paragraphs, like the opening line of some of the paragraphs.
This is the Cliff Notes.
These are the Cliff Notes. Go ahead.
All right, here we go.
This is how important. This is important.
A dramatic reading of this very important email that Gary received, or excerpts of it. Hello, please forward this email to all congressmen and senators in the United States, England, and all free democracy countries.
All free democracy.
So you know it's important.
Yes, exactly.
Haley Berry and a Julie Cruz that's in a X-Men movie, The Storm of the Century, left much of our staff without power, some even without a place to live, but we knew so many East Coasters were worse off. Understand that someone has been trying to drive me crazy since the day I left Staples Inc. because Julian Miller's relatives in Paul Stanley and Sue Sarandon and Carol Brown's family, who were related to Dr. Fury, know they put the chip in Ryan's head because of the steps incident in my youth where a man to my left was running up steps and collided with a person that was in his way to my left. Understand that since the day Ryan O'Neill left Staples Inc., where an African Obama named Penny Outlaw told me to sign a 3-month severance agreement, or which she said it would ruin my family. This is serious business here.
Yes, it is very important.
Understand that I found skin stuffed into the corner of my into the corner of my bathroom towel closet in my current Holly Hill, Florida apartment that had a penny on top. I've heard of much worse things that happen in Florida. Understand my ex-wife's direction is on a neon sign that's on the right side that says Boo, a name that she used to call me when we were married. Well, that's sweet. Understand what happened. My ex-wife's family behaves like a Charles Manson controlling Portuguese Leonardo Brezhnev cult. That's intense.
That is.
Also, Tim Conway Jr., who's related to Leo Meehan, who had a relative show up at a nurse orderly that handed me pants when I went for a CAT scan in Florida, and he came into a room and made a comment that says Leo Meehan has the intelligence. Leon Panetta and J. Edgar Hoover intelligence broadcast technology as Leo in part of the Hoover family heritage. Understand, Ryan wants to catch the person who planted a 83 Canadian penny in my towel closet. And by the way, I read that exactly how it's written, if you're wondering about the poor grammar and all that.
That's
and that's just part of it?
Oh, that's like a small part of it.
Wow.
This is like, just goes on ad infinitum.
Well, Gary, if any of this actually happened, it is disconcerting. You have to admit. Something has to be done.
At some point, though, at some level, I just don't care, though.
Right, but I'm just saying. As a person of empathy, I'm concerned for this person.
Exactly.
Especially the skin.
So I should respond.
Yes.
That's what I do to those, is I reply to all and say, tell me more.
Yeah. It's a good policy, yes. Well, you want to let them know you're concerned.
Yeah, I know. Okay, let's see. I gotta come up with a list. You're running. We are our guest tonight.
By the way.
Yes. You should know better than to come on the show.
Well, I'm
I'm just
listening
shocked.
to you read another argument for an income tax in New Hampshire. I mean, that's what I take from that. Is one of the more cogent arguments for increasing taxes.
Yes, of all the arguments for an income tax, this is easily the best.
Yeah, it is the best. I mean, I take away from it a lot of passion there.
Exactly.
Well, part of it's the way I read it, but
yeah. Well, that was it was a good recitation.
Thank you.
Exactly. Anyway. So, our guest tonight is Bill O'Brien, who's running for this. It was former Speaker O'Brien, who is the running for the 2nd Congressional District for the United States Congress.
Ooh.
So I'm thinking I got to come up with it because I've got a few people coming on that want to go for Shaheen's seat.
Right.
Karen Testerman's coming on, I think next week. No, next week is. Oh gosh, why did his name just? Who's the guy, the anti-gambling guy?
Jim Rubens.
Jim Rubens is coming on next week, and then Karen Testerman in a few weeks.
Jim is from Hanover area, and I think thinking of exploring running for Senate against Jean Shaheen, as is Karen Testerman, founder of Cornerstone.
Yeah.
Which is a advocacy group, a really good woman.
So yeah, she is a great lady. But yeah, Jim Rubens is a good guy too. I mean, but anyway. I got to come up with a list because there's certain things that I care about more than others, and so I want to kind of stick to that. But I have to ask you because you were you said that was it Obamacare specifically was equivalent to the Fugitive Slave Act.
Not quite, but the two measures were mentioned in the same sentence. What I said it is as destructive of personal and individual liberty as it was the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. And by that I meant that both of those acts required individual citizens to serve the purposes of the government in ways that destroy liberty. With the Obamacare, for the first time ever, a citizen, because of a federal government dictate, has to engage in commerce. You have to go out and...
The mandate you're referring to.
The mandate. You have to go out and buy a service you may not want. As a matter of fact, if you're a young person under 30, that's the last thing you want to do in terms of being reasonable, is spend, on the average, it will be about $8,000 a year to buy a service that's going to cover you for, the average risk is about $800 or $900 a year. That's how much a person that age...
Unless you want to take the hit of the tax or the fine, whatever they want to call it.
It is, and it's quite complicated how much you'll have to pay, but you will have to pay.
What's really complicated is the Obamacare was sold to us because there was, 80 million Americans who were uninsured. I forget what the number was. But we were reading in the paper the other day that the group of people that don't have to pay the fine if they can't afford tax are the underemployed. So therefore, the one group that they were targeting to make sure they have insurance is exempt from the law.
They are. They are exempt because they don't. Well, no, they still have to buy insurance, but if they are, their income is below that which is necessary to get Medicaid, they can get Medicaid. So in New Hampshire right now, if you are a healthy adult, and we're not talking about women, children, there's separate programs for them. There's separate programs for senior people.
To be clear, New Hampshire's had Healthy Kids, which is always covered for I don't know how many years. Covered uninsured
children, and if they are under a certain age, I think it's 5, they cover their mothers.
Right.
Now, this is healthy adults, and if your income as a healthy adult is 66% of the federal poverty level or under, you already get insurance, Medicaid insurance, in New Hampshire. What the Obamacare is trying to do is to order people who have incomes above that level to go out and buy insurance. Whether or not you have a job, go out and buy the insurance or pay a penalty on your tax return. And what it's trying to do is to get states to expand the Medicaid program to cover more people. when the Medicaid program first came in place, I think it was in the early 70s it started. The last state to join it was Alaska, joined in the 1980s, late 1980s. And it was intended to address the poor of the poor, the 2 to 3 to 4%. Mississippi, maybe up to 8 or 10%.
Right.
New Hampshire is by some counts, the third most affluent state in the country, more like 3%. What this intends to do to New Hampshire is expand that from what was intended to be 3%, maybe 5%, up to 20%. So 1 out of 5 people in New Hampshire will be covered by Medicaid. So if you think about what is happening here, Gary, because you've sat through budget debates and all, this is hijacking
I slept through budget debates.
You joke. You're about that because I've watched you, Gary. You're a good representative, and you do listen. You do think about these issues.
But he does read Shotgun News. That's documented.
Yeah, that was documented.
That has been documented, but that's a valuable piece of political literature.
Oh,
It is. Yeah.
Particularly the page that he had it open to was very nice.
It was very good.
That's the evil of the camera because he was flipping quickly past that and going to.
I know. I was hurrying past the girl.
Did you hire him to be your PR guy secretly?
Yes, pretty much.
Okay, I thought so. Yeah.
So what it's intended to do is to hijack state finances to extend Medicare, and then hijack the finances of young people to pay for old people on insurance. If you look at who's uninsured now, primarily 2/3 of them are people under the age of 40 who have the ability to buy insurance and choose not to buy insurance because it's reasonable not to. If you're a person of the age of 65, you consume 6 times the amount of on average, medical care as a young person does.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so you're impacting the system on the average of $8,000 to $10,000 a year as an older person.
They had death panels to take care of that.
Well, there's actually a third way that it intends to make medical insurance affordable. It's going to ration it. And rather than us having an individual choice to ration it based on, I might not go to Disney World because I want the better insurance policy, or I might be, a young person who's 28 and figure, I'm going to go surfing and I'm not going to work
I don't care.
hard.
Right.
And I know the odds are with me. That decision's taken away from us, and we're being told to participate in this program. There's something that I think we have to keep in mind about how all this came about. Medical insurance in many countries is very affordable. In Switzerland, for example, they have as good, if not better, healthcare results as we do here. And their average government contribution, even before we have Obamacare, their average contribution is about 1/3 of what it is in the United States. And that's because they have a substantially more robust free market. All the government does there, it says, if you're in poverty level, we'll help you out, we'll give you a subsidy. But if you're above that amount, we don't give you a tax deduction for buying insurance. We phase out that subsidy. You're on your own. And the difference is that the free market system works there because someone like me who has the ability to go out and buy insurance or won't get a tax deduction, so I'm going to be thinking, when I get medical care, I'm going to get the most efficient medical care in the world. I'm going to search around for that $10,000 knee replacement rather than just get the $50,000.
Yeah, there was a story about somebody who went to Greece, maybe, because it was cheaper to fly to Greece to have their knee replaced than it was because they were going to pay for it out of pocket.
Well, I'll respect the privacy of the person, but we have a state representative in New Hampshire who went to, I think it was like Panama or Costa Rica or something, engaged in this tourist medical care, had to have a lot of dental work done. He had a quote that it was going to cost well into 5 figures, $12,000, $15,000. Went down to, I think it was Costa Rica, looked at it first. The facilities were as clean, the people were as competent, and she went down there for 2 weeks, had it all done, and she had a vacation on top of it, and it cost her like $5,000-$6,000, half to a third of the price. And so I think we're going to find, that's a choice you're not going to be able to have if you're being told by Obamacare, go buy insurance. The only insurance that is signed up for this healthcare exchange so far in New Hampshire?
Blue Cross.
And Anthem Blue Cross. That's it. What government is wants to do, again, having produced this problem, is create a monopoly to solve it. Do you think things are going to get cheaper?
No, of course not. The other thing, too, that really bothered me during this Obamacare process is the politicians in D.C. are so tight with all these people. Like, for instance, the AARP supported Obamacare because they were going to be able to sell some insurance.
What most people don't realize about the AARP is that it's an insurance company masquerading as a senior citizen lobbying.
Right, because they used to be a senior citizen lobbying group.
Right.
Then they got into the insurance, and they were making so much more money from insurance that the lobbying part of it is kind of not that financially lucrative.
Back in 2009, the devil in the form of the Obama administration went to the insurance companies and said, I have a bargain for you. My bargain is I'm going to order people, in this new law we're contemplating, to buy products and services from you. And the insurance companies made that bargain. They said, well, that's just great.
Sure.
I'm a lawyer, and I've had a practice. I have to go out and solicit clients and try to get them to come and talk about how good I am. I try to keep them away from you so they don't get the other side of the story.
Right.
But I talk about rates, and I talk about services and competence and all the things that anyone in my position would do.
So you've seen my Facebook, I hate Bill O'Brien.
Yeah, you calmed it down, but I've seen it before. So I
think a lot of people try to keep folks away from Gary.
Yeah, as well they should. But and so I compete on all the things that most businesses compete on. Quality, price, availability, promptness.
Now this is selective insurance companies, though, right?
It's going to be those insurance companies that agree to provide the types of policies that Obamacare mandates.
So they basically wrote the law, right? I mean,
that's
how Washington
it was
works,
a real symbiotic relationship. You Obama administration and Democrats are ordering people to buy my services, and I'll work with you on what those services would be. And the point I was making by bringing my own example into is, I'd love a law that says, by the way, everybody has to buy some services from lawyers each year.
Right.
It would be great. You might not need it. You might not want to buy it from me. You might want to contact somebody in India who can do your contract review for $20. Your will for $20 rather than the $23 I'll charge. But sure. But and so it was. Sure, AARP supports it. Insurance companies support it. But I'll tell you, just as I started to say when I said it was a bargain with the devil, it is just that. Because now that it's passed, Harry Reid and others are very Sibelius, are very candid. This is a long step forward into the journey to a single-payer system, because it won't work.
Yeah, of course it can't.
Half of the deadlines that have come so far have been waived. None of this
somebody
works.
said Pelosi's district, a lot of them were waived.
I think she actually had a district-wide waiver.
Yeah,
for it. It's great to be, former Speaker of the House, not in New Hampshire, but in Congress, and get your whole district a waiver.
But the other one that bothered me about that is that there was never any of the things the federal government actually had authority to do, which the federal government under the Constitution never had authority to do this. This is why I don't really tend to listen to long debates about the pros and cons of Obamacare, because fundamentally it's unconstitutional.
What it does is we lose the genius of the federal system that was set up for us, which is that there should be 50 experiments. When Mitt Romney was taking his hits for having put in the precursor for Obamacare, it always amazed me that he didn't come back and say, "You want to know what? This is our attempt to deal with a problem."
He actually did say that.
Maybe as then a lot of things, it wasn't reported.
No, it wasn't reported, but that's what his argument was. He says, "Well, that's the way the federal system is supposed to work. Each state can try this. If it doesn't work, the other states aren't going to do it.
Right.
Or if it works well, but some parts of it stink, then the other states will take the parts they like and reject the parts they don't like."
Exactly. And I think, to do a real quick bridge that might be head spinning here, but that's the concern I have with Common Core when it comes to education. I'm not sure if most of your viewers are aware that there is this effort to have this common education system in the country.
Yeah, we had
as a
Anne
whole.
Marie Banfield on.
Yeah.
Couple
Times now. I think,
couple
right?
times.
Yeah, no,
about
she's
that, yeah.
just an expert on
She's
it.
on it. She's awesome.
And that's a concern I have is that these are inherently local issues, and education should be parents and teachers.
But back to Obamacare before I forget. The one that really bothered me is the one thing the federal government could do under the Constitution, which was to facilitate so states could learn from each other.
The
maybe.
Commerce Clause, yeah.
Yeah, but the other thing they could have done is start to do tort reform, and/or the one that really
That'll
bothered
never
me.
happen.
I wonder why. The one that really bothered me was they didn't do anything about the pharmacy companies
Well,
getting real competition from outside the country. So they,
Right.
Well, they also own DC.
Yeah, that's just it. It's the
Big
lobbying.
Pharma, yeah.
Yeah, but part of the problem we have, I have went to law school, back to law school about 10 years ago now, a little less than 10 years ago, to get a master's in intellectual property law, and I took a lot of courses on biotechnology and so forth. And one of the things I found out, I guess I'd sort of known this, but it really became clear when I took these courses, is that our country pays for the drug research for the rest of the world. When we see these drugs that cost like $1,000, $2,000, $10,000 a year to be on, some of these miraculous drugs, the reason they cost so much is because they're recapturing the cost of research to put them in, to invent them, and paying for future research. Then you go to Europe, then you go to Canada, you go particularly to some of the third world countries, and you'll see drug regimes, these HIV drug regimes, for example, that cost $20,000 or $50,000 a year here, will be available for several $100s a year in these other countries. And so it's basically us funding the world, and that's really there's
a certain amount of honesty to that, but it's also full of crap too. In that, I'll give you an example, a quick example, because I use this asthma spray. Okay, I've been using that for I don't know how many years. Somebody put a bug in Congress's ear because the propellant in this they didn't think was green enough. They changed the propellant, okay? And now that prescription that was what do you call the drug that you don't?
Generic.
Generic. It was generic. It was cheap. It was all over the place. They changed the propellant and outlawed any of the old ones that had the old propellant, so that now this costs an arm and a leg again, and this company can re-up their patent.
Right.
So you're correct, but a lot of it's bull. A lot of it is just another way to hose people.
There are a lot of
Hosiery going on.
reforms. Yeah, there's a lot of reforms. Our patent laws are overly aggressive. Our intellectual property laws are. As an intellectual property lawyer, I'm supposed to be very protective of these laws. It's great. You think of our copyright laws, and this is, and I apologize for ranging so wide, but our copyright laws are protect writings for 75 years after the death of the author, if it's an individual.
That's pretty ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. It certainly is. If you look back to the founding of our country, the term for copyright protection, I'm going to take a wild guess here, but I'm in the area, was about 10 to 12 years, somewhere on.
Well, even Franklin said that he didn't really even believe in patents for himself because he feels as though knowledge should be freely shared, not tied up.
And I kind of agree with him, but remember, Benjamin Franklin was one of the richest men in the colonies, so he was able to be magnanimous.
He could afford
about
that,
sort of stuff.
Okay, so so that was Common Core. I agree, but I want to touch on a couple more things before I let you go, because we're running out of time quick. I wonder what your thoughts were on all the drones and NSA, and the other one was, I don't understand why people aren't tweaking over Gene Shahin's arm twisting of the IRS to try to attack Tea Party members. I don't understand why that isn't.
So a couple of different scandals, in the scandals that we see going on in Washington just once again and unfortunately make the whole place down there look squalid. You know, we look at what happened in Benghazi, we look at the NSA violations, you look at the pressure put on journalists to find out who's leaking and you know what they did with some Fox journalists. You look at the IRS scandal. You know, specifically with the NSA, I really do believe that the courts have walked away, in Congress, unfortunately abandoned our Fourth Amendment. You know, and it's the very thing that we feared in 2009, 9/11, that we said we can't let these terrorists have their victory. And their victory wasn't bringing down the buildings per se. It wasn't slamming a plane into the Pentagon. What it was is to make us a fearful people, abandoning our civil liberties. And it's unfortunate that we're giving them that victory. We don't have to give them that victory. Certainly, we need an agency like the NSA that is engaged in espionage, but overseas, limited. If it touches American citizens, it should be tightly controlled by Congress to prevent an invasion of privacy. It isn't necessary, and it isn't successful either. I mean, look at
look at the Boston bombing. Those guys. They should have had that information that they were going to do something.
I mean, for better or worse, the Russians called us up and said, "Watch these two jokers."
Right.
You know, and so what did we do? We didn't watch the two guys.
No, because they're busy reading everybody in the Tea Party's email.
Yeah, and I think they, you know, that's such a disgraceful episode. And I don't think we're going to find. And I believe the investigation will go on. Well, I don't think we're going to find a smoking gun of a memo from the White House that says anyone who's in the associated with the Tea Party, anyone who's a liberty-oriented person, a constitutional-oriented person, lean on them hard, take away their civil liberties. I don't think we're going to find that. What we're going to determine in the end is that President Obama, to all of us and also to the union members who run the IRS, because the IRS has a union there, and they're very, very liberal. They gave a lot of money to the liberals and the Democrat
Party. I think it was like 90-something% or something like that.
Yeah, I think they're going to see that they're sitting there going, you know, we kind of don't like these Tea Party people, and we're getting permission from the president to
but they weren't just getting permission from theoretically, there's no link that Obama gave permission, but there is an absolute link of Gene Shaheen and.
That's right.
I haven't heard about this. I'm curious about this.
Gene Shaheen, Chuck Schumer, and who's that guy who was a comedian that ran for office?
Al Franken.
Al Franken, and I think there
were 6 total.
6 total wrote a letter to the IRS. I think 2 years ago, asking, or a year or so ago, asking them to thoroughly investigate these people in the Tea Party.
And so what did they do? They investigated.
They did.
You know, but I think that, again, responds to the environment. You know, I used to do some antitrust work as a lawyer, and there's something that's absolutely illegal under antitrust law. That's if you and I have set up competitive business for you and I to sit down and figure out what our terms, policy, and prices should be. Now, on the other hand, what I can do is kind of look the other way, and while you're sitting there, shout off what my terms, condition, and prices are. And you go, I guess those could be mine too. And so it's called signaling. Right. And it's entirely legal to signal, if you know, you know, as long as you do it publicly and so forth. We see it at gas stations. They put the prices out there, so the guy now down the street knows how much to charge.
Okay.
And also we tell him as a legislator. But that's the effect of it. Obama, since day one, has been signaling. He's been talking about typical white people, so he's been signaling people to turn over the race car whenever it's available. He's been talking about violent Tea Party people that has no basis in reality. Gary, you know, these are our friends, and these are
well, some of them.
Yeah, many of them are our friends, but you don't know what, they're not violent people. They may be people you and I disagree with at times.
No, I'm joking.
And I do. I think they're a little bit over the top in their ideas, but never their actions. They're peaceful people. And yet they've been demonized as being violent people. And that rhetoric has kept up to the point where you get some members of the IRS saying, "Oh my Lord, these are the terrorists." You get a chief of police in Concord that thinks it's quite legitimate to call out Free Staters as violent people, that he needs a civilian tank to control.
Heard about that,
yeah, I mean, which is just ridiculous. The Tea Party people are at worst, silly in their protests. Walking around with marijuana plants, trying to get arrested.
No, that's different. That's a different. The Tea Party, because I was at the in 2009. I went down with my son and daughter-in-law to D.C. and that Tea Party rally was mostly people about my age. Okay, and it was like 500,000 people. Nobody got arrested, and the primary that wasn't for the Tea Party wasn't about marijuana. It was about Obamacare. It was about the budget,
the stimulus, the overspending,
the overspending, and the just growth and breadth of government. How big it was getting. That's what the Tea Party was.
I don't know if.
But the libertarians you're talking about are another group that they referred to in Concord, which is the Free Staters and Libertarians.
Right.
They mentioned and the occupiers.
Even they are marginal to the group. This isn't something that will help me get elected, but it's absolutely true, and therefore I want to say it. The Tea Party people are a hope for America, because if you look at when hard times came in 2009, 2010 in Europe, people got out and demonstrated because benefits were being cut back and they weren't being increased and all that. In America, the demonstrations were, allow me to take care of myself. Don't overtax me so that I can work my way out of these times of trouble. And that's encouraging. That self-reliance is encouraging. That it still is a strain to the American character encourages me quite a bit.
Yeah.
Where they concern me, though, is they want to default, at least from what I hear a lot of them say, they want to default on our debt, which I think is incredibly dangerous.
I don't think any of them would say we want to default on the debt. What they want to do is have a plan to pay off the debt.
But if we don't extend the debt ceiling, which I constantly hear these people arguing against, we got to vote against raising the debt ceiling, which of course isn't the same thing. I think a lot of them conflate that with increasing the budget, which it's not. It's saying we're going to pay off.
I think the more reasoned ones say, look at, we understand we can't default on the debt. We understand that we have a momentum of borrowing going that we can't just, churn off to tomorrow.
Yeah.
But they want to know that momentum has an end and then has a way to roll it back. And the problem they have is they don't see that conversation taking place on the other side.
Right.
And politics being what they are, you tend to say, well, okay, here's the cards I have. I'm going to play my card, and unless you agree that this is the way the game's going to come out, and the game has to come out in a way that protects the country from out of control debt. It will never happen because the dollar will collapse before it does. But somewhere around 2030 to 2040 or so. Sounds like a long time off, but particularly for young people, it's not that long off. It's recognized by everyone that our currency will collapse because it's unsustainable. And what we're facing is the worst sort of tax, the tax that takes away our savings. Probably at this point, Matt, you're trying to put some money aside. You have a 401k, an IRA. You're trying to put some money aside. What they'll do to pay this off, because governments always do unless the people tell them not to and tell them to bring it under control, is they inflate the currency.
Yeah.
I walk around, actually, I have it right here. I have a legitimate bill from Zimbabwe. It's for $100 trillion. That's what government does when it doesn't control itself.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid, I lived in Germany for 4 years. My dad was in the service, and he was posted to a couple of army bases in Germany. And as a little kid, 12 years old, what I used to do is go around collecting money. I'd go collect bottles on the Saturday morning, and then I'd take the trolley down to downtown Frankfurt and go buy some money, some old German money. And I'd see these like 50 billion mark bills that couldn't have bought you a loaf of bread at the time.
Wow.
If we're not careful, we will have inflation that will head off in that direction.
Yeah.
And if you're a government that is owing $17 trillion as we do now, and on your way to $30 or $40 trillion, at some point you're going to say, let's just have inflation.
Right. Right.
And that takes away all of our savings. Anyone who was saved and been reasonable pays that bill.
Right, yeah. If you've saved $100,000 and all of a sudden $100,000 is worth $10,000.
Right.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, and no one likes to grow older. I'm growing older at this point. So
what happened?
The best thing happened. I continued to stay around. So, but I can remember the days when earning 10,000 a year was probably enough to put you in the middle class. 12,000 a year was enough to put you in the middle class, and now you have to earn what is it, 70, 80,000 a year before you can start off and buy a house and get a car and all. It's a terrible inflation. We've already had it. If you look at when the Federal Reserve came into place in 1913, I think it was,
yep,
that our dollar is only worth 1 to 2% of what it was worth back then.
Wow.
So we've seen it in the past, and it is unfair to people, and it's very dishonest of government. If I run and if I get elected, that sort of fiscal responsibility, which you and I worked on so hard, Gary, this past term, and in the state legislature, is something that we have to see come to Washington.
Yes, but what about the what's your feeling about the drones and things like that? Do you believe that a drone should be used on it in the intercontinental United States?
No, I think we've militarized our police, unfortunately. And for the number of times that you would have to have police with the type of armaments that they are gaining now, they are few and far between and never worth what we see. When I see a city the size of Concord, for example, 45,000 people, think that it has to have a tank. I say to myself, and it sounds silly on one level, but it's scary that that's the relationship they would have with the people that they're supposed to be taking care of. It used to be that the model of most police departments was some variation of to serve and to protect.
Yeah.
And they may well still have those words written on their badges, but they're afraid of the people, and they're acting in an oppressive manner to the people.
Or they want us to be afraid of them.
Or they want us to be afraid of them.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I don't want to get too revolutionary in my speech, but some people in the past have said at the time of the founding of our country is that the government ought to be afraid of the people, and the people should never be afraid of the government.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what the New Hampshire 10th Amendment to the New Hampshire Constitution is: the right to revolution.
Right.
The idea is that they're the public servants are the servants, so therefore they're accountable.
Well, one of the things
but if the people are afraid of the government, now you're their servants.
When I was speaker, I went around the state talking about what we're trying to do in the way of reducing regulations and so forth. And one of the things I tried to do is summarize it by saying we have to remember that this is a government. These are citizens that have chosen to have a government. Mm-hmm. This isn't a government that has subjects.
Right.
And the attitude of drones, the attitude of SWAT teams to execute warrants, the use of tanks. That's the attitude of a government that thinks it has subjects. Do you remember? One of the things that amazed me, and I think we first saw it back with the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas.
Yeah.
They had a gun charge against David Koresh, who was the owner of it, the leader of this group, and he impressed me by all accounts as being a real weird individual.
Oh yeah.
And probably somebody who was distasteful, and I would have been really disappointed if a relative of mine joined that group and listened to him. But nonetheless, whether or not the gun charge was legitimate, they knew every day he used to go out jogging. A reasonable government, a reasonable police would have driven up to him one day and said, "Dave, we got some charges.
Get in the back of the car.
Get in the back of the car."
Yeah, you've made that point.
Instead, they attacked him with tanks and the accoutrements of war.
Wait. That's not quite accurate. They first attacked. They came up with I think it was like a cattle car full of BATF agents and stormed the place.
Yeah, okay,
but then they came in with the tanks and everything else. But in effect, you're right. I mean, it was if first of all they on the news, and this is one of the things that I always try to stress to the viewers: when you hear the federal government with its mouthpiece like ABC and NBC and CBS come out and start attacking somebody like they did David Koresh, that he's a child molester and all this other crap, the antenna should go up and say, wait a second, why are they vilifying this guy that badly? Mm-hmm. Because it's probably not true. And it is also irrelevant to the situation. If you looked at David Koresh, they said he was having sex with underage kids and all this other stuff. but it was the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms that was the one that tried to invade the compound.
Right, not Child Protective Services.
Okay, not Child Protective Services.
Right.
And so it was an irrelevant information because you really didn't have that information. They just did their best to make sure that the general public hated these people. Right. So that when they did go in with tanks, everybody's okay. Well, we might as well kill them. They're all scum.
But don't you understand, as I'm sure you do, that particularly from the left, that's how they conduct their political discussions today. One of the things that I knew when I became speaker, because my politics are very conservative, and I knew that I would be the subject of personal attacks. I knew it, because I'd seen what happens to conservative leaders, and they try to choose something that they think they can get away with in talking about a defect in the person, and then they try to accentuate it. And so with me, it was going to be I'm a bully, so they decided to challenge me whenever we were running the House and we were in session. And I saw it happen to Dan Quayle. I met Dan Quayle for the first time this past year.
Yeah, but he was right. They absolutely tore him apart for Brown, what was her name? She had a TV show.
Something Brown.
Something Brown. Anyway,
she had a child.
She had a child.
Murphy Brown.
Murphy Brown. And the episode was she was having a child out of wedlock, and it was Dan Quayle said that's not right. They shouldn't be encouraging that on TV.
Well, that's right. This is a role model.
He was right.
Yeah, and we can argue that point. The argument is she was a very affluent newscaster in this program, and certainly she can, because of her income, afford to accommodate irresponsible behavior because she can buy services to take care of it. The normal young girl can't, and it destroys their life. But yet they'll look at Murphy Brown. And so, but the point I was going to make is when I met Dan, and I have to tell you, I was kind of had the same prejudice others did.
Wait, you got to back up. You said something I think in error. You said it destroys their life. I don't think that's quite true, because the thing that would destroy their life is actually if they get an abortion, because then they become very self-destructive and suicidal.
Certainly, I think we'd both agree that the best thing is for a young teenage girl who's unmarried not to get pregnant.
To abstain or do something to keep from getting pregnant.
And often, you're absolutely right in terms of weighing taken a life to what it's going to do to the mother's life to have the child. There's no comparison.
Right.
Obviously, we don't take lives for that reason. We don't execute children because they're inconvenient for their parents.
That's usually why they are executed too.
And unfortunately, but certainly as we have watched ourselves go from the early 1960s, where 3 or 4% of births to white mothers were illegitimate, and about 20% of births to African American mothers were illegitimate, to the point where now it's 60 or 70% of births to African American mothers are illegitimate, and we're up around 30% of a little bit more actually of births to white or Caucasian women. We realize that's a very, very bad thing.
It's huge, and the thing is even saying that a child out of wedlock is illegitimate is now you're insulting a group of people. You're not even allowed to speak the truth anymore.
Well, I think it's because it carries that connotation. You're calling a human being illegitimate if you say, someone's illegitimate.
I know, but
sometimes we have to use, and I'm sympathetic to that because it's not the child's fault. Right. But sometimes we have to use words with impact to understand what they're doing to our society.
Yeah, because
and we can't pussyfoot around. We were supposed to call people who are in this country illegally undocumented immigrants rather than what they are, which is legal aliens.
They illegally come over the border. They're illegal aliens.
That's like saying a drug dealer is an undocumented pharmacist. It certainly is kinder to the undocumented pharmacist to identify him as such. But the fact is, he's a drug dealer.
Right. It's like Ross Terrio is a documented drug dealer.
Right. I don't quite agree with the comparison, but I don't personally call human beings illegal or illegitimate or any of that, but that's
well, it's their status.
I'm a little more politically correct.
It's their status. I mean, they can be a good person or a bad person. Yeah. But getting back to Dan Quayle, because I really do want to say this, Dan Quayle is an intelligent, engaging, interested person. Just a play. I talked with him for about an hour. It's just, and nothing like the public caricature that they made of them. And we see that with Sarah Palin. I remember when Sarah Palin was chosen for the vice presidency. My son was at the Republican National Convention. It was about 20 feet, kind of a little off and behind her when she was making her acceptance speech. And of course, I'm on the phone with him, talking with him. And he said, "Dad, her teleprompter just stopped." And you couldn't tell. You're looking at her, and she was continuing with this speech that was really quite well delivered. Obviously, and I bring that up because obviously a woman of intelligence, a woman of ability, a woman who had every right to be where she was at that moment, making an acceptance speech from a major party nomination for vice president. But they said they made her into a caricature of
well, they did. The Saturday Night Live did that thing. You can see. Like her statement that you can see Russia from my back porch, she never made that.
Right, she didn't make that.
That was made on Saturday Night Live.
But what she said was almost less comprehensible.
You can see Russia from Alaska. She didn't say as Obama might have, that you can see the other 7 states of the 57 from Chicago. Because he did say he went to 57 states, right, and he said things that were a lot more obnoxious than that. She never evidenced the type of prejudice that he evidenced when he talked about his grandmother as a typical white person in dealing with racial issues. He made a lot of. I just call them mistakes. Everybody says stuff that is just stupid. Well, but that's okay. But if you're going to vilify Sarah Palin, then you have to do the same thing to Obama, and that's not what they did. The fact of the matter is, you should lighten up and not criticize people just because they make a, like the 57 states thing that Obama said. That's just stupid.
Well, it's just a mistake. That's not even stupid. That's just somebody misspeaking.
It's just a mistake, and we ought to be aware. But in the media, conservatives don't get a break because part of it is to push that they're somehow defective. I made a speech Friday night.
You don't have to push that hard when they talk about me.
I made a speech Friday night, and I was talking about President Obama's foreign policy, and I was talking about how we've taken our friends and made them into our enemies. We've emboldened our enemies, and I said, and now we have to worry about. And I said Libya, and meant Iran. Using a nuclear weapon. Now, no one's ever brought that up. The press didn't notice that. No,
right.
But afterwards,
that's an honest mistake.
Yeah, and afterwards, I walked away. I said, "Oh, I meant to say Iran." I was thinking Iran. I was physically looking at a map, with Iran there. We eventually, I know to a certainty, they'll take that speech out and say, well, he thinks that Libya has nuclear weapons.
Right.
And so Obama said 50
weapons. They don't have nuclear weapons.
They probably don't have much at this point after the chaos there. But it's unfortunate. You want to say that, just as you're saying, of course, President Obama he's out every day. Who knows what he was thinking at the time? Maybe he was thinking of 57 varieties. He was
probably exhausted.
He was exhausted.
Campaigning, yeah.
He was exhausted.
Yeah.
I remember at one point, President Bush was. The first Bush was asked when he was shot down. He was the youngest pilot, actually, in the Navy in World War II.
Right.
And he was shot down not too far off of Iwo Jima. And somebody asked him, as you were in your parachute going down, what did you think? Well, he's a young guy. He's like 20 years old. He's probably sitting there going, oh, crap.
Right.
Jesus, this is not good. Am I going to survive? I'm scared and everything. Instead, he said, well, I was thinking of Mom and the apple pie, And obviously what's running through his head, what's running through his head is I better come up with a good answer to this. Rather than, I better be, I just want to be a legitimate person, which is, sitting there going, I'm scared and I don't know what's happening. And,
there's not sharks out
if
there.
they're not sharks, and and maybe I was even crying. Who knows?
Yeah.
And so we don't deal with our politics in a reasonable manner.
No.
And a part of it is because it's become a gotcha game.
It is, and that's actually one of the things I've only actually done it to, I think, one person since I started the show, but it wasn't deliberately. It was Professor Malcolm Smith.
Oh, the bullying thing.
Yeah. Because he was there on bullying, and we were talking about bullying, and he had done all this research on all these kids, like the Columbine and all this other stuff. And I'll cut it short because we're running out of time. And so I said, because Lars Christensen. Lars had told me years ago that most of those kids were on, psych meds. And I said, is that true? Is there any truth to that? And because some of them, he just kind of sloughed it off. I says, you did all this research. You know the answer to this. This is the only time I've really tried to get, and it was just because his answer was so evasive.
But that wasn't a gotcha thing.
Gotcha. That's just a good interview.
You were asking a legitimate question. Yeah.
And so I pushed him, and he reluctantly got pissed. He got reluctantly.
He bullied us.
Yeah, I bullied him into saying it was over 75% or 75%.
Right.
But he didn't. That wasn't his point. He wanted to talk about bullying, so he didn't want to admit that maybe there's mitigating factors that cause these kids to go off the frickin' farm, off the deep end. But
off the deep end onto the farm,
into the
pool on the farm.
Why don't we start reading this again? That'll make more sense.
We've already had our argument for income tax.
Yes. Okay. That's correct. Yeah. But anyway, we're out of time, Sir Bill. I probably gonna have to have you come on again and get more details if you want sometime.
It's a pleasure. It really.
But who else is running for that seat?
Well, so at this point, and Annie Custer is, obviously. There's a suggestion that Gary Lambert, former state senator from Nashua, one-term state senator. You tell me. I haven't heard anyone else.
Okay, that's it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's still pretty early.
It's early day. It really is. And I imagine others will surface. Certainly there's folks out there, as we often see, who have been successful in business, for example, that would think, I think I'll use some of my money to go campaign for office. We don't know.
I'll go throw away all those millions I made over the years. Yeah. But anyway, thank you very much, Mr. O'Brien.
Oh, Gary,
Representative.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. I guess that's it.
That's it. That's
it. We're going to go off the deep end into the pool on the farm.
Yes, on the farm.
It's a hot day. Bye, everybody.
It's a hot day.